ever feel like sometimes when you're online, you're just overwhelmed with how much information there is?
Right.
Like too much to even process.
Absolutely.
It can be kind of crazy, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of the feeling I got when I started reading this article. A brief warning, but I mean, it's different from like all the other stuff out there because it got me thinking
Okay.
about how we figure out what information we can actually trust,
Oh, for sure. Especially online.
Especially online, right?
Yeah.
It's tough.
It is tough.
So,
Especially with things like Wikipedia,
yeah.
which the author mentions using a lot.
Yeah, they do.
It's sort of our go-to
It is.
for those quick answers. But it definitely has its strengths and its limitations.
Yeah, I mean, how reliable can any source be when it's written by
Right.
basically anyone who wants to contribute, right?
Yeah, it's crowdsourced.
Crowdsourced, yeah.
You get the good and the bad with that.
The good, the bad, and the ugly. But that reminds me of how the article talks about, like, brand names,
Oh, yeah.
Like how they can become so common that we just use them.
Like Kleenex.
Exactly. For tissues. Yeah, or like Band-Aids or something like that.
Yeah, it's become...
It's cultural shorthand, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
Which the author connects to how, like, the word Allah,
Okay.
which originally referred to a moon god, became the word that Arabic speakers use for the God of Abraham in Islam.
Interesting.
So it's fascinating how that happens, right?
Yeah.
But this kind of leads me to what I think is like the most interesting part of this whole article.
Okay.
The author's talking about how they were looking up a specific image on Wikipedia. It was a Russian cross with a crescent moon on it.
Okay.
And they were looking at it, and then like later on they went back to try to find it again.
Yeah.
And it was completely gone.
Like it was never there.
Like it was never there. Yeah. And it's kind of creepy.
It is creepy. It's like
it was deliberately scrubbed from the internet.
Right. And it makes you wonder who's controlling this information.
Exactly. And like what else is out there that's just disappearing?
Exactly.
Oof.
Yeah, it feeds into that whole idea of
Yeah.
information being controlled and manipulated.
And the author even explains how that particular symbol represents a Russian victory over Muslims in Kazan.
Yeah.
And the cross is placed above the crescent to symbolize that,
Oh, so like a triumph.
Yeah, like
Like we won kind of thing. So it's like, wow, this isn't just like a random image that disappeared.
Right.
This is like a piece of history being erased.
Good point.
Which is pretty messed up when you think about it.
It is.
And the author even worries about like younger generations not having access to the same information that we did.
Right.
And it's scary because it all kind of seems to be connecting to this bigger thing that the author's noticing.
It's like a trend, like a trend in the political and social landscape,
Okay.
especially after 2016. They feel like politically things are moving rightward.
Oh, okay.
But then culturally and socially, things are going further left. It's a very...
Interesting observation.
Yeah, it is an interesting observation.
Yeah.
And it makes you think about, like, how much do these perceived shifts influence what information we see and what we don't see, like with that Wikipedia entry.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's
complex.
It is complex. Yeah, and the author actually goes even deeper.
Oh, really?
Arguing that corporations are also playing a role in this.
Okay.
In shaping the narrative.
Interesting.
Yeah, this is where they start talking about how corporations are becoming like activists.
Oh, yeah.
Promoting all this stuff, like social justice causes and liberal ideas.
Yeah, you see that everywhere.
Everywhere, right.
Yeah.
Like every company is doing it now.
It seems like it.
Yeah.
But what's the author's take on that?
Well, they're saying that it's not necessarily about
All right.
genuine belief.
Oh.
They're saying it's more about
Yeah.
maintaining stability for the company
Okay.
and ultimately making more profits.
Mhm.
They're suggesting that a society of radical individualists is actually good,
What do they mean by that?
driven by consumption.
Oh, okay.
They're saying that's beneficial for big businesses,
Interesting.
which makes you wonder.
Yes, there's some truth to that.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, companies aren't exactly known
Right.
for putting ethics above profits, are they?
Yeah, that's a bold statement.
For sure, but it makes you think,
It does. It really does.
doesn't it?
Yeah.
So anyway, that's where the author starts to get into censorship,
Okay.
specifically on social media.
Makes sense.
Yeah, they're talking about how a lot of people have been removed from platforms like Facebook and Twitter,
Yeah, like who?
like Alex Jones,
Oh.
Paul Watson, Lauren Southern.
Yeah, I've heard of them.
So it's a big deal.
And this is where it gets tricky.
Yeah.
It's like free speech versus the power of big tech.
Right, because they basically control
They do.
everything online, right?
It's like they decide who's allowed to talk.
And who's not. Yeah.
It's a tough one because,
It is.
yeah, you want to protect free speech,
For sure.
but also we have to worry about
Yeah.
harmful content,
Yeah.
you know?
That's true.
So where do you draw the line?
Right.
Yeah,
It's tough.
it is tough.
And the author doesn't really give us a solution,
Oh, really?
but they do mention something called the fourth political theory. I've never heard of that. Yeah, it was developed by a guy named Alexander Dugin.
Okay.
It's a pretty complex theory.
Yeah.
But basically what he's saying is that groups based on like
Okay.
race,
Mm-hmm.
culture, religion
Okay.
should have their own autonomy
So instead of like
instead of this like
everyone being the same.
global system that we have now.
Got it.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
So maybe we should do that before we move on.
Yeah, good idea. Okay, so Dugin sees the world today as dominated by liberal individualism and globalization.
Mm-hmm.
And he thinks that leads to all these unique cultures and traditions getting
Oh,
eroded.
interesting.
So his fourth political theory
Yeah.
is basically like a call to move beyond
Okay.
that traditional left-right political spectrum that we always talk about,
Okay.
and instead like focus on making sure that we preserve all these different identities.
So instead of everyone just like melting into one big global pot,
Exactly.
it's more about respecting and celebrating the differences between groups.
Yeah, like recognizing that each culture
Right.
has its own values and ways of life that deserve to be like protected and nurtured.
Okay, I get that. But how does this connect back to like
Right.
the author's worries about censorship?
Well, the author sees this push for everyone to be the same,
Mm-hmm.
you know, especially through corporate influence, as a threat to this idea of diverse cultural identities.
Okay, good.
Because by controlling what information we see,
Right.
they can like shape our perceptions and values and push us towards this more uniform worldview.
So it's like the author saying, hey,
Yeah.
there's another way, and we need to like take control of
Yeah.
our own knowledge before it's too late.
Exactly.
Okay.
They even suggest things like
Like what?
archiving information locally,
Oh, wow.
even in physical forms,
Really?
like books and stuff.
It's funny because they started by talking about Wikipedia,
I know, right?
this huge online encyclopedia, and now they're suggesting we like go old school
Yeah.
and make our own libraries.
It is kind of a return to a simpler time
Right?
where you had to like actively seek out information
Yeah.
instead of just passively consuming whatever's put in front of you.
Yeah, it's like being more intentional.
Right. It's not just about
Yeah.
having access to a ton of data. It's about choosing what you believe carefully.
Yeah. So it's not just about being skeptical of everything you see online. Right?
You have to actually like dig deeper and
Uh-huh.
consider different viewpoints.
Yeah. That's where critical thinking comes in.
Critical thinking.
It's about developing those skills to evaluate information thoughtfully,
Okay.
to question your assumptions,
Mm-hmm.
and to recognize bias both in the source and in ourselves.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
We all have our own biases.
We do.
It's easy to just look for information that already agrees with what we think.
Exactly. It's called confirmation bias.
Oh, wow.
And we all do it?
Really?
Yeah. But if we can be aware of it,
Okay.
we can try to look for different opinions,
Okay.
even ones we might not agree with.
Like challenge our own views.
Exactly.
It's like that old saying, don't believe everything you read on the internet.
Right.
But now it's even harder
It is.
because things can just disappear,
Yeah.
like that Russian cross and crescent.
Exactly.
And you might not even know what you're missing.
That's why archiving information is so important.
Yeah.
It's like you're taking control.
Creating your own library of knowledge that you know is trustworthy.
It's like building a fortress.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, a fortress of knowledge.
Yeah. To protect it from all that information overload.
Right, because it can be overwhelming,
It can be.
all that information coming at you.
It really can. And it's up to us to filter it all,
Right.
to decide what's actually valuable and what's not.
But how do we even do that?
Right.
There's so much out there.
That's tough.
Like every time I turn around, there's like a new study,
I hear you.
a new article,
Yeah.
a new opinion on everything.
It can definitely feel overwhelming.
It is overwhelming.
But there are some things you can do
Oh, really? Like what?
to become a more discerning consumer of information.
Okay, give me some tips.
Okay, well, first, always consider the source.
Okay.
It's like, who wrote this?
Right.
What are their credentials?
Mm-hmm.
Do they have an agenda?
Okay, so basically, don't just believe anything you read online.
Exactly.
Do your research.
Yeah, and don't just rely on one source.
Okay.
Try to find different perspectives.
Different perspectives.
Yeah, see how different outlets are covering the same story.
Okay.
And look for any differences or contradictions.
So it's like cross-referencing
Yeah.
different versions of the story.
Exactly. And look for evidence.
Evidence.
Yeah, like citations,
Mm-hmm.
links to credible sources.
Okay.
Make sure the statistics they use are accurate
Got it.
and make sense in context.
I think this is something a lot of people don't do.
Yeah.
They just kind of take information at face value.
It's understandable we live in a busy world.
We do.
It's easy to just skim headlines.
Yeah.
But if we want to be informed,
Right.
we have to be more critical.
More engaged.
Yeah, exactly.
This is making me think about my own habits.
Yeah.
I definitely have room for improvement.
Well, we all do.
Really?
It's a process.
Yeah.
You know, we're always learning
Right.
and improving.
I guess so.
Yeah.
It's just a lot to keep in mind. But I think what I'm really taking away from this article is that knowledge is power.
It is.
And if we're not careful, we could be giving that power away.
By just blindly trusting whatever we see.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like we're giving up control, you
Yeah.
know?
It is a little bit scary when you think about it.
It is, yeah. But at least we can take that control back.
That's the good news.
Okay, good.
We just have to be more aware
Okay.
of how things work.
Mm-hmm.
Like really hone those critical thinking skills.
Yeah, and then we can be like better citizens.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
More informed, more empowered.
That makes me feel a little better.
Good.
This whole conversation has been like a wake-up call.
I'm glad.
Yeah, it's made me realize that I need to be way more careful about where I'm getting my information.
And how you think about it too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And speaking of information control, we were talking about how the author thinks that corporations might prefer
Oh, right.
like a society of radical individualists, and they think that this like benefits them.
Yeah, because if everyone's just focused on their own needs and wants,
Yeah.
then they're more likely to buy more stuff.
Consume.
Right. Which obviously makes companies more money.
Oh, that makes sense.
That's kind of a bleak outlook, though.
Yeah, it is, but I can see how it fits into their whole argument about like this push towards a certain kind of society and information control being part of that.
It's definitely thought-provoking.
Yeah, it really is.
And it raises questions about the role of corporations
Yeah.
in like shaping our beliefs and values.
Especially when they have so much power over what information we even see.
Exactly. It's like they're the ones holding the map.
And we're just trying to follow along.
Right. And that's why it's so important to develop our own compass.
Our own compass.
So we can navigate this whole information landscape and reach our own conclusions.
Okay. I like that analogy.
Yeah.
Speaking of different paths,
Yeah.
we were talking earlier about Alexander Dugin's fourth political theory. It's a lot to wrap your head around.
It is.
But I'm really curious to hear more
Okay.
about how this could actually work in real life.
So imagine a world
Okay.
where different cultural groups, instead of being forced to all be the same,
Yeah.
are encouraged to preserve their own unique ways of life.
So it's more about celebrating our differences.
Exactly. And within each of those cultural spheres,
Yeah.
you could have all sorts of variations.
Like what?
Everything from political systems to like economic models,
Okay.
social norms, artistic expressions.
Wow, that's very different from what we usually hear about.
Yeah, where everything seems to be going towards uniformity.
Right, like one big global culture.
Exactly.
Whether you agree with Dugan or not.
Right.
It's really interesting to think about.
It is. It makes you question
Yeah.
whether there's really just one right way
Yeah.
to do things.
To organize society.
Exactly.
It challenges that whole idea.
And it fits with the author's worries about one dominant narrative being forced on everyone.
Yeah, for sure. I think what's really interesting about this article is that it's not just theoretical.
Right.
It feels like a call to action.
And that comes from their own experience.
Yeah, with that disappearing Wikipedia entry.
Exactly. It was a wake-up call for them.
Yeah, like a reminder that the information we depend on can be really fragile.
And it made them question.
Weapons in control.
Exactly. Which is a question we should all be asking.
That's true, because in the end, knowledge is power.
It really is.
And we need to make sure we don't lose that power.
Absolutely, by thinking critically, evaluating sources, and forming our own opinions.
This deep dive has been amazing.
I'm glad you think so.
Yeah, it's made me realize how important it is to pay attention to where I'm getting my information from.
That's great to hear, and hopefully it's made you curious
It has.
to learn more about these ideas.
Yeah, like Dugin's fourth political theory.
Exactly. Or even that story about the Russian cross with the crescent and how all of this applies to your own life.
Yeah, and how we consume information.
Right, because sometimes the best way to learn
is to just ask the right questions.
and find your own answers.
That's what the deep dive is all about, helping you navigate the world of information.
Exactly.
And find those hidden gems of knowledge.
So keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep diving deep.
Thanks for joining us.
It was my pleasure.